on the topic of self-diagnosis. There's a lovely video by Healthy Gamer GG, who's a psychologist who does YouTube videos, talking about self-diagnosis, and I think that he really encapsulates it well. He talks about the exact problems with self-diagnosis because, from what I understand from what he said, that doctors aren't positively identifying things, they're negatively identifying things, as in you have to rule out things. I've dealt with this with lupus and other things where it's like you have to, here are the symptoms and here are the things that symptom could be. Like I think, what was it that he did, depression and like a thyroid issue or something, and they had a list of all the same symptoms. But the thing that I want to emphasize, I suppose, is that yes, you should be suspicious of your own diagnosis, and rather don't confirm, strongly suspect. And I think it's really awful how much and many people and organizations and articles are just like, no, the sins of self-diagnosis, when so many people do not have access to mental health care. So they're like, well, make sure that you use this as a guide and then go on ahead and go see a psych. And then it just feels like a big fucking slap in the face every single time. Because it's like, okay, well, I can't do that. So I guess I just have to, they're like, well, I can't self-diagnose. And so what do I do? I think you need to be able to exist in a liminal state. Like, I am diagnosed with dissociative disorder. That's what I had access to. They did just the category. What within? Higgledy-piggledy, I don't know. And there are distinct personas within me, which screams DID. But as I've been digging into it more, I feel like I'm more of a person with OCD who has like delusions and obsessive with my inner world, like more like maladaptive daydreaming, and those differences matter. But the other thing that I started to recognize was it's quite possible that I do not have DID. I do, however, have distinct opinions and amnesia from times when other people are driving, and the tools of DID are useful to me. The language of DID is useful to me. And so I don't stand up and say I am a person with dissociative identity disorder, but I do follow the DID community and I take those tools. Like, my kiddo is really convinced that he has autism, and I'm not a doubter. I've had a lot of autistic folks in my life of varieties, and I think that his sensorial needs fall more in an anxiety and OCD type place. But also, I can't know, he can't know. He has more mental health access, but they're still unfolding all that, you know. But still, a lot of the tools that we use for autistic folks, with allowing them to stim and calm their vagal nervous system. He is diagnosed with CPTSD. These type of things are useful for him. So letting him listen to the autistic community and take from those things the things that are good tools, like, just start using the toolkit if it works for you. You don't need to, like, we have a strong urge to, like, Rachel Bloom, a diagnosis. I finally found my kin. A diagnosis. It's the answer. It's very, very easy to want to fall to that, but a diagnosis is a starting place. Like, I did not think that it was, I'm also diagnosed with OCD. And I did not think that was possible because I am not a clean or organized person. And they're like, think about the words very slowly. Obsessive, compulsive. Okay, maybe I do have some problems with obsessions and compulsions. And as I started to understand it better, I started to realize that diagnosis does indeed fit. And understanding about it and having that label helped me open up a discourse with myself that help me solve some problems. And so I think that's kind of where we need to be, because I do get what people are saying when they're like, if you have not gone to school for years and years and years, you really don't have the tools to diagnose this. And also, there's only so far that self-reporting and we can only see so much from inside ourselves. And so there's a lot of things you miss when you're not an outside person who's also observing like reports from all of the rest of your life. But also, you can trust people's self-reports a lot more than a lot of doctors think you can. I was just reading another study by the, the National Health Institute. And they were saying that, yeah, a lot of people's self-diagnosis really correlates with accuracy for that diagnosis. So the conclusion of the study was you can really trust what people say a little more than you think you can. People are under this guise that people are wanting to gotcha, like young kids with gender exploration. Like, stop trying to gotcha them. Like, maybe they will decide to be their assigned gender eventually, but certainly screaming in their face about how they're a faker is not going to help them get anywhere. People want to be validated and live their lives as they see it and be a writer in their own story. And yeah, there are some people who are toxic in the way that they do this, but there are people who validly have the diagnosis who are toxic in the way they express themselves. There are people who think that they have that diagnosis but they're slightly wrong, like maybe like in my case, maybe I do have DID and I think it's just this, and my OCD nature goes, well, but I don't fit all the boxes, so I couldn't possibly, it doesn't work exactly like that. It's like, well, it's more complex than you think it is. I really want to emphasize that if you're somebody who thinks that you shouldn't self-diagnose, you should really take a fucking look at the mental health system. Even if you do have insurance, it's hard to find somebody who's accepting new patients. Even if you do find a new doctor, they still have to be able to understand. I remember having a psychologist who said that maybe I'd fit better with somebody who was faster paced. I talked too much for her to literally understand what I was saying. And she was so overwhelmed by me and everything that I was that she's like, you need to see someone else. And I'm like, cool, there's not anyone else. But I'm definitely not staying with the therapist who cannot literally keep up with me. Which doesn't, I mean, one of my kiddos' therapists very much was kind of aware of queer families, and he had a very, very monogamous normative view. And I do think it's really important that, so like looking at the research he was talking about with, you have too many adults in his life and you really need a concrete, like, I look back at a lot of the research that I think that was talking about, and they talk about not having a rotating cast of people. But if he had had a mother and a father biologically in his life and a bunch of aunties that weren't related, that's not something that would have cued a alarm bell at all. And we don't have our polycule did not introduce people to my kiddo until they were permanent. All the people sitting there at session when he was 8 had been there his whole life. So I don't think that was apt for the thing that he was saying. So even if you do get a therapist, often the way that they think and their own biases are antithesis to the solutions that you need, depending on their culture, depending on your region, depending on your needs. And they might just not have the experience in the area that you need help with. Also, many therapists, especially older established therapists, they get into a mode, they're given a lot of different methods because different methods work for different minds. But there's an anchoring bias around the first method that they decide to use. It's seen as more efficacious because they used it, it works. Positive feedback loop. So there's so much mess and stress when it comes to getting diagnosed. And oftentimes it's wrong. Like, my kiddo is clearly ADHD, but also when he first got diagnosed, he got a 20-question questionnaire and was called ADHD. We were able to actually verify later, but sometimes even getting a diagnosis from a professional is not as vetted as you think it is. It depends, it depends, it depends, it depends, it depends. But if you're someone thinking about self-diagnosis, invite yourself to have working theories more so than conclusions, because it is a fair critique that people are jumping on the bandwagons of, oh my God, that's me, that's definitely me, when there are many, 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 many overlapping things and uncommon ways that different disorders can, and things that you don't even know about that could be affecting you. Do you have major depression, or do you have a thyroid issue? Like, stay curious and stay open, but also believe yourself, because if you have a thyroid issue and it's making you depressed, you still have to deal with depression in the meantime. Like, you still could benefit from the tools that people who are depressed and very low energy use to guide their lives. You could literally be somebody who doesn't have that biological marker, but be in that, like, a lot of people have chronic pain. They literally use more of their energy, and so they are in a depressed state, as in, like, biologically depressed. Not that mental health depression isn't biological, but you know, like the description of depressed. They could benefit from depression tools. Just somebody who has a chronic illness could benefit from the, like, sometimes only doing micro things and trying to tempt yourself out of bed and taking it a little bit at a time, the tools you use for depression, even if it is not at all their diagnosis. So yeah, stay curious, believe yourself, but also have room for suspicious, healthy doubt. That's why I like working theory, because it leaves room for being disproved, but it also is an operational theory. It's based on valid facts of your life. It's based on the valid experiences that you have, and it is your operating principle until you learn better, you know? And I think that's just as valid and much more accessible. And, like, what the fuck are we supposed to do? Are we just supposed to wait until there's access to be mindful, or to try to solve any of these problems? It's like, oh, just sit here and wait until the American healthcare system is fixed in order to... You're gonna be waiting until you die, honey cakes. Just a thought. Just a thought, just a thought, just a thought, just a thought, just a thought.